What is up? We are back again, breaking down our redraft wide receiver rankings. We're going through this top 25 wide receivers. We already did the running backs. Make sure to check that out. And we're going to go through kind of in depth, looking at the cases, the pros and cons for all of these guys. Of course, you guys can take this advice straight into action in best ball right now, or you can kind of save this, put it in the back pocket for your redraft leagues. Let's start with last year's wide receiver one, this year's wide receiver one, the Triple Crown winner from 2024, JaMarr Chase, who is both of our wide receiver ones, our consensus wide receiver one, most yards, most receptions, most touchdowns in the league last year, a legendary 23.7 PPR point per game season with Burrow, with Chase, and with Higgins back again to run it back, have another productive season through the air. Defense is still not very good in Cincinnati, still projects to be a bottom half of the league type of unit. New coordinator, same pieces pretty much. Bengals led all teams last year with a 66% neutral pass rate, and they still project highly again. JaMarr Chase, one of the best 2 to 3 receivers in the league. Not much else to say.
Yeah, you summed it up. There's a reason why this guy was lapping the field at wide receiver last year. It was the reason why this guy was having me crying tears of sadness on Thursday Night Football when he dropped, I believe, 52 or 53 fantasy points when Mason basically ended up having me sing the American anthem after that game after our bet. Not fun. If you played against JaMarr Chase at all in 2024, you'll understand why he's our wide receiver one going into 2025. However, the previous crown of wide receiver one in a season, if you guys watched the running back video, you'll know that I referenced a clear top 6 in redraft this year. You saw the 3 running backs in that video. We just mentioned JaMarr Chase. The other 2 wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. You have Justin Jefferson as your 2. I have CeeDee Lamb as my 2. And like I said with CeeDee Lamb, he was the number 1 scoring wide receiver in 2023. Over 400 PPR points, over 23.7 points per game. In fact, his 2023 season actually outscored what JaMarr Chase did in 2024. And I would say from a macro perspective, yes, I would prefer Chase's situation. Burrow, I would take over Prescott. Cincinnati Bengals offense going to throw the ball more, 650 pass attempts in the 2024 year. I think Chase is the deserved one. But when I'm comparing the upside cases for wide receivers after him, I actually do think CeeDee Lamb has the next highest upside because we know if Dak's healthy, 35 plus passing touchdowns, 4,500 plus passing yards, like he did literally in 2023, where he was the number 2 quarterback in MVP voting behind Lamar Jackson, and arguably probably should have won the MVP reward if you actually compare their years. It's simple with CeeDee Lamb. He's an alpha wide receiver one with a strong passing attack that actually just added a complement to him. With CeeDee Lamb, we saw 2 productive years with him as the number 1 wide receiver, but he was the only source of attention that defenses had to give. Now, because you have George Pickens on the outside, they go aggressively make that trade. I think like what T. Higgins has done for JaMarr Chase, taking some of that pressure off, George Pickens can do for CeeDee Lamb. People might be saying, well, if George Pickens is added and he commands a ton of volume, that's a negative for Lamb. Like, no, I don't think it is, because CeeDee Lamb can still go out there, have a 27, 28, 29% target share, and George Pickens is more so taking ancillary targets off of guys like, Jake Ferguson, Jalen Tolbert, maybe some of the running back targets that would have went that way this year. Regardless, CeeDee Lamb is the number 1 piece of this offense. CeeDee Lamb has evidenced 23 plus point per game upside. And CeeDee Lamb, even despite Dak Prescott last year, again, when he was healthy, only 247 passing yards per game, only 11 touchdowns in the 8 games he played. And yet CeeDee Lamb was still giving you 18.5 points per game when Dak was healthy.
Yeah, I think the difference between Lamb and Jefferson to me is actually just floor. Because I think you can argue, and you just did, that Lamb's high end range of outcomes has actually even been higher than what Jefferson has done in his career, and just as high as basically what Chase represents. I think the only thing that I would steer away from CeeDee Lamb and onto Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson with Jordan Addison, with TJ Hawkinson, has already proven he can beat out very, very good targets. And despite having a worse quarterback, and we can kind of pivot right into Justin Jefferson, 18.7 PPR points per game last year with Sam Darnold, who again is probably better than a rookie or second year JJ McCarthy at this point in time. Yeah. He was the wide receiver 3 overall. He was a little bit streaky. He had 5 of his first 6 games where he scored a touchdown, and then he didn't score again until week 14. So he was kind of weird tale of 2 halves a little bit. He's got a rookie quarterback or a second-year quarterback who hasn't played yet. Probably won't have quite the level of passing production that Sam Darnold had, but it's Justin Jefferson. He's an animal. Back in 2023, he had a 20-plus point per game season with TJ Hawkinson finishing as the tight end 2 overall, and Jordan Addison, who as a rookie finishes like a top 30 wide receiver, and Kirk Cousins was hurt half of that year. The floor that you get with Jefferson is so high. all of you guys who followed the Flock League know that I'm sick of being burned by Justin Jefferson's semantics, and it's a lot easier to stomach Justin Jefferson having 16 points per game or like a down season than it is to stomach passing on Justin Jefferson. Trust me from experience.
16 points per game from Justin Jefferson would be more than what Garett Wilson had last year. So unfortunate, but that's where we're at. Justin Jefferson, for my money, is probably the best receiver in the league. In fact, I think he is the best receiver in the league. It's just for me, when I'm looking at two of the other top three receivers, in my opinion, I think these are the three best receivers in the league, Jefferson, Chase, and Lamb. When I see Dak Prescott, when I see JaMarr Chase versus, as much as I love J.J. McCarthy, again, go blue, former Michigan alum, I mean, Sam Darnold had 39 passing touchdowns and 4,500 yards last year. Like, if J.J. McCarthy did that, he would be a first-round dynasty startup pick.
Yeah, I don't think they were quite that gaudy of numbers, but they were still
up there, man.
They were still good. Yeah, there was a point in time where people were talking about Darnold being an MVP candidate.
Finished, I believe, 8th or 9th in voting.
Yeah, Jefferson, to pretend like Jefferson had bad quarterback play last year, I mean, in my defense, I thought he was going to have bad quarterback play, and he had much better quarterback play.
Who would have expected what Darnold did?
No, nobody. But at the same time, it could be possible that I was a year early, and we do see a little bit of a down season out of Justin Jefferson. However, I'm not going to be stupid enough to make that mistake again. He might make J.J. McCarthy look like a top 7 to 8 quarterback in the NFL because, in addition to what he does, Addison's a great number 2. Hawkinson's a good tight end. I feel really strongly that Jefferson, even if the worst happened, J.J. McCarthy goes down for half the season, isn't ready to start the year, and we got, who's their backup quarterback? Gardner Minshew?
I believe so. Who did they end up signing? Was it Gardner?
They traded for somebody, didn't they?
Regardless, though.
Sam Howell. They traded for Sam Howell. They traded for Sam Howell.
Yeah.
Even if Sam Howell had to start half the season, I still expect Justin Jefferson to be close to 20 points per game.
Yeah, I think he'll be close there. I think he'll probably be, if I had to put a range of outcomes on Jefferson, again, even in his ceiling, I think it's lesser because, if J.J. McCarthy was already a Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow caliber quarterback, Minnesota might just win the Super Bowl. That's kind of where we're at right now. I think we're kind of baking in the lesser quarterback play. And for me, it's if I think the range of outcomes for CeeDee is 17.5 to 24.5, JaMarr Chase, probably similar range. Justin Jefferson would be 18.5 to 21.
Yeah, and these guys respectively, I have Jefferson 105 in my overall redraft rankings. And
105 or 6 for me.
And 106 is where I have CeeDee Lamb. I do prefer Bijan, Saquon, and Gibbs to these 3 receivers, and I actually have Chase at 101. So there is a little bit of a tiny little tier gap between Chase and the other 2 receivers, but for the most part, these guys are all studs. Let's get into tier 2.
One thing, too, you mentioned CeeDee was 5, Jefferson was 6. I actually almost have it the inverse, where I have CeeDee and Chase at the top, the running backs mixed in, and then Jefferson, I believe, at 5 or 6. You can correct me when we get home. Him and Gibbs, I know, are 5 and 6, respectively.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get into tier 2, where we have a big cluster of young receivers, especially, who are all very, very talented guys. Let's kick it off with Puka Nacua, who I believe is your 4, my 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Both of our 5s, because our 4s are actually, we have them. You guys will see in a second, but our tier 2 at wide receiver is hilarious because my 4 is, I believe, your 7, and your 4 is, I believe, my 7. So that's why, Puka Nacua, we both had at 5, and he ended up being the highest of the consensus. But neither of us have him at 4, but he's our number 4.
Yeah, and Puka Nacua, back-to-back top 6 scoring seasons. Last season, we saw the elite upside when he wasn't hobbled by injury, and of course, we'll have to see how it factors in with Davante Adams coming in, then Cooper Kupp.
Yep.
But Puka just proved that he's the dude there.
Yeah, and again, we'll see the actual reception perception report when it officially comes out. Again, I'm not going to throw a graphic that Matt put in confidence in the Discord, but Matt did a sneak peek on Puka Nacua's reception perception this past year, and he was 80th plus percentile across the board,
which is dominant numbers. We're talking elite receiver, and
he officially said graduated to tier 1 NFL wide receiver in the Discord message.
Yeah, and people like me who are I don't know if Puka's quite as good as these other guys, might have to shut our mouths.
Yeah, and last year, like he said, 21.8 PPR points per game in the games he played 50+% of the snaps. Obviously, he had, for example, week 1, he left early. Another game, he played 40% of the snaps. Not really something that we can contextually take away going forward. But the Rams did move off of Cooper Kupp. And maybe we do see some more slot snaps. And in fact, I think we will see some more slot snaps to offset that. He only actually played 29.9% of his snaps in the slot in 2024. I think that's probably the biggest misconception with Puka is that for the last couple of years, people are like, oh yeah, him and Cooper Kupp just kind of like rotate in and out of the slots. Like, no, like Puka's actually been an outside wide receiver and sub 30% of his snaps have been in the slot. But with Davante Adams coming, again, we'll talk about Davante Adams in a second and why I'm actually so high on Davante Adams. But the simplest way to put it is 2025 Davante Adams is far less washed, in my opinion, than what 2024 Cooper Kupp was. And I also think he's a much better vertical separator. He can actually play that X wide receiver role. He can beat man coverage, press coverage at a much higher rate. And if that opens up a lot more value inside, in the middle of the field to use Puka on the move as that slot, yards after catch ability, I mean, he's one of the best yak receivers in the league.
Yeah, no, he's an absolute dude, man. And Matthew Stafford is Matthew Stafford. And he's still playing at a high level. You feel so good about what Matthew Stafford represents as far as, 30-plus passing touchdowns, 4,200 yards. Guess the one worry you'd have is, like, does the bottom fall out of this offense? Because Puka's been banged up. Stafford, of course, a lot older.
They lost by 8 to the Eagles in the divisional round this year. Like, they were the only team that actually gave the Eagles a fight in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, no, they're a good team, man. They could definitely be a really, really strong offense yet again. We, of course, trust Sean McVay to use him correctly. Not much you can poke holes in. Like, I pick up at 109 in my home league. We got our draft order already, and I'm going to have a really tough decision to make whether I go with one of these Puka types, some of the other receivers we're going to talk about in a second.
Running backs from the other video.
Or do I go with, the Genties, the Achans, the McCaffrey types in that other video like we were talking about?
Maybe 2.
In an ideal world, I could get 2 of those guys, or maybe even one of the top 6 guys slides to me, but I don't think that's probably going to happen. Let's move into Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has been wide receiver 4 in fantasy in back-to-back years, over 18.5 PPR points per game last year, at least 115 receptions back-to-back years, over 1,250 through the air, 10-plus touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. St. Brown, from a redraft perspective, is everything you could possibly want from your number 1 receiver. He has been a wide receiver 2 or better, meaning a top 24 scoring wide receiver on any given week, 27 of his last 33 games. An absolute model of consistency. For those of you guys that do value consistency and you want to know exactly what you're getting, 16 to 24 points every single week out of your top receiver.
Spoiler alert, the risk ratings are going to love this guy.
Oh, absolutely. And I in last year's risk ratings video, I said he was the safest pick in the entire first round. And that kind of proved to be the case, even without Ben Johnson now, which could affect his overall output, especially for Jared Goff. That might hurt the offense in general. But I do think it hurts Laporta and Jameson Williams more than it hurts St. Brown.
It does.
Because before Ben Johnson was the guy that we all thought was this huge architect of the best offense in the league, and the Lions were kind of just a so-so offense or a ascending offense, St. Brown was still doing his thing. And him and Goff are like mind melded at this point in time. So if you don't want to miss on your first round pick and you're picking at the back of the first round, 108, 109, 110, something like that, and you're like, I just want to hit a triple. You might not hit a home run with St. Brown, but you want to hit a triple with St. Brown. I feel really good about him.
He is like the prototype of the guy where it's like, you'll have like the old school saying that people have said, it's like, well, you can't win your league at your draft, but you sure can lose it. It's like, you're not losing your league if you take Amon-Ra St. Brown in the first. You know exactly what you're going to get. Does he have wide receiver 1 overall upside? No, and that's kind of why I rank him more so at the tail end of this tier 2 at wide receiver. Again, we'll talk about a couple guys that I think have higher comparative upsides, but if you're talking about just straight median range of projection, I think he's pretty clearly the top of this group.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it relates to full PPR leagues, non-best ball formats. Again, on Underdog, half PPR, best ball format. Nico Collins, Brian Thomas, Malik Nabers probably going to have a little bit more projectable upside on any given week. But it's not like St. Brown doesn't give you 30-point games either. Yeah,
no, he's got upside. Again, like we'll talk about a couple of the other guys in a second because me having him at 7 is actually no slight to St. Brown himself. In fact, this, spoiler alert, range of wide receiver is very fucking good. Just like Nico Collins. Again, you guys have seen the jersey before. I've rocked it in videos on our channel. I've rocked it in clips over on the Flock League. He is actually my wide receiver 4 and my 7th overall player. And he came out of the gate swinging. First 4 weeks of the year when the Texans offense looked good, when CJ Stroud was playing at the level he was in his rookie year, 22.75 points per game. Now, unfortunately, we know what kind of how it played out. I'm over on the Flock League talking about my team's unbeatable. I'm undefeated. And then boom, Nico Collins, Rashee Rice, Malik Nabers back to back to back. Hammy gods unfortunately take it from Nico Collins. And I think they probably could have stolen away a legendary level ceiling from Nico. Because when we're looking at even what he did when he came back, his season on a whole, in games that he played above 50% of the snaps, 18.96 PPR points per game. And that was in a year where Stroud had an objectively bad year too. The direction of the Texans offense was, up and down at times. Obviously, Bobby Slowick kind of cast away this offseason. They make the upgrade, hiring Nick Caley away from the LA Rams. And my bet on Nico Collins is simple. He showed last year that even despite the Texans offensive floor, he could be a near 19 point per game scorer. But if Stroud does bounce back, or if he takes a step up as a talented third-year quarterback, if Caley's offensive scheme hits, if Nico Collins stays fully healthy on a week-to-week basis, he was the only wide receiver who was pacing JaMarr Chase in the early portion of the year.
Yeah, my one thing with Nico, and we're a little bit farther apart on him because I think of all these guys, the fact that he's the oldest, has dealt with some injuries, the fact that he also has Stroud, who doesn't have a good offensive line, who did have a down season last year, and they traded away their left tackle, who's their best offensive lineman. The fact that he's like the field stretcher, and you add Knoll, Kirk, and then Jaden Higgins on the outside. Is it possible that Nico Collins' 18.96 PPR points per game last year, which is about what St. Brown gave you, is more close to his ceiling? Again, I know you're going to disagree with that because Nico is a better receiver maybe in real life than St. Brown is. But I just feel so good about projecting St. Brown, man. Like, the guy plays through everything. He's on a better offense with a better offensive line, with more offensive insulation. To me, that's why I prefer St. Brown, especially in full PPR managed redraft leagues. If you're a half PPR best ball, you want could Nico have a 40-point week in week 17 next year and win somebody best ball mania? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to prefer St. Brown, but I will combat the fact that you mentioned, well, if he's a volatile, more deep threat, and what's going to be an offense that takes less deep chances, I would argue that the additions of Jalen Knoll, of Jaden Higgins, make it more that he can actually take on a full-fledged inside-out role. Like, again, he's mostly going to be an X wide receiver. I'm not going to say, he's going to transition full-time.
I don't think his role changes, to be honest.
But Jaden Higgins can play on the outside. So I'm saying if they are in 12 personnel and you want to shift them inside at that Z spot, have Jaden Higgins play in that X spot, like, you have more personnel versatility than you did last year with Stephon Diggs, primary slot receiver, Tank Dell, a toothpick. He can't play as the X. At least Jaden Higgins at 35 gives you another capable body to be that sacrificial X at times when you need to move Nico in for a matchup perspective.
Yeah, the last thing I would say is that I think Nico did run hot in some ways with Diggs going down and Dell not really playing that well. And I do think in totality, this receiver core could provide him a little bit more target competition. That was my only point on Collins, but I would still spend an early second-round pick on Collins. I just wouldn't spend a first-round pick on him. Yeah,
and that's the biggest discrepancy. I believe I have him 7th overall. You have him at 12th, and it's actually almost like I believe you have St. Brown at 7th, and I have him at 12th. So.
Yeah, and Malik Nabers, I actually would prefer to Nico Collins, mainly just because I think it's important to contextualize how dominant Malik Nabers was last year. At 21 years old, he turned 21 during training camp. So he was very young coming into the league. Nabers produced 18.2 PPR points per game. Now, this is why I have him over Collins. You just said in the game splits when we take away injuries and all this bullshit, Nabers did that without that shit. He had no quarterback play last year. He was wide receiver 6 in points per game production. He led all wide receivers as a 21-year-old rookie with a 35% target share in the 9 games in which the Giants scored at least 14 points. Extremely low bar. That would be dead last in offensive points per game last year. Nabers at 21 years old, 114 targets in 9 games. That's almost 13 a game. 77 receptions. That's almost 9 a game. 822 yards. That's 91 yards per game. 6 of his 7 receiving touchdowns. 21.7 PPR point per game score in that stretch. And for reference, his quarterback, or at least the guy who's going to start the season as his quarterback, and Russell Wilson, had the offense of the Steelers scoring 23 points per game instead of 14 points per game, which is the sample that I'm basically picking here.
Again, there's not going to be negatives for guys in this range. It's more so just whose positives do you like the most? Again, for me, Nico Collins was the only one actually pacing with JaMarr Chase when he was healthy and when the offense was healthy at the beginning of the portion of the year. That's why I have him at 4. Again, there's no discredit to Malik Nabers. You just outlined when the offense was functional. We're not even talking about like a great offense. 14 points is bad. 2 touchdowns. It's bad. It's 2 touchdowns, a couple field goals, and a safety or whatever, depending on how you look at it. But regardless, 14 points per game, it's like even the worst offenses in NFL history. I mean, we're looking at like 16.5 points per game.
Like the Panthers had like 18 points per game last year.
Right? So it just kind of outlines just how bad the Giants were. Like you said, quarterback upgrade, whether it's Dart, whether it's Russell Wilson. Again, I tend to believe it's going to be a majorly Russell Wilson throughout the majority of the year because, first round investment. I tend to think their route is going to be similar to the Jordan Love level development than it is we're going to throw Dart in there, week 6.
I think it'll look like Cousins and Penix probably.
It could look like that too. Again, the difference too is that Penix went in the top 10. Dart went at 25, I believe.
Yeah.
So there are some differences regardless of whether it's Russ, whether it's Dart. It's going to be an improved quarterback situation. I guess my argument here would be like... It's not sustainable year to year to be a 35% target player. Again, because that's the only year of sample size we have of him, we do see that. But what if it falls to like 30, 31%? Again, I'm picking hairs here. Like, who knows? Maybe, Theo Johnson develops a little bit, eats into some of it. Maybe the ancillary wide receivers take more of a role.
I mean, Wan'Dale had like 140 targets last year.
Well, that might be the problem.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
maybe like Darius Slayton needs, but like again, we're poking holes here. Regardless, when a rookie shows you this level of upside, listen to them. I have him over Amon-Ra St. Brown for the reason that I think he has higher comparable upside. But at the end of the day, all 4 wide receivers in this range have legitimate 18 to 21 point per game range of outcomes.
I think Nabers is the one guy in this range that has legitimate possibility to outscore the top 3 guys just because of how good I think he is.
Yeah, and we could very well make the case again, if you're in more of a best ball format, you favor the guys in the better projectable offense, but when you're in a full PPR and you're getting a guy that has this level of command on his targets, you could very easily make the argument he's 4.
Yeah, and I think the thing I love about Nabers too is like you could start your draft with let's say you take St. Brown at 9, and people, because Nabers plays for a bad team and a bad offense, you might get him in the 2nd round.
Yeah, like full transparency, Nabers is my number 6. The only 2 in this range I had ahead of him were Puka and Nico Collins.
Yeah, and I think I have Nabers, I believe, at like my number 11 or number 12 overall player. Like, I'm willing to take him in the 1st round, and I think you won't have to. I think a very vast majority of home leagues, you'll get him in the 2nd round. Yeah,
and I mean, speaking of Nabers, we just mentioned former LSU alum, big time years as a rookie, one of the best prospect profiles. In fact, I believe when you reworked the model, he ended up number 1, yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So just goes to show you this guy's on a potential superstar level trajectory. And if he had the Dak, the Burrow, even the J.J. McCarthy level projection this year from his quarterback, like you can make the case he's a mid-first round.
Well, that's why I say the last thing I would say on Nabers is if Jackson Dart, for whatever reason, is a dude, like comes out, has a great year, like Nabers could legit have a 24 point per game season.
Yeah, it's in the range of outcomes, and we could be talking about him up there in the top 3 with Chase, with CeeDee Lamb next year. So I'm fully on board there. Next guy, it's funny, we mentioned, like I said, LSU alum with Malik Nabers. We have his teammate at LSU, Brian Thomas Jr., 16.7 PPR points per game as a rookie, wide receiver 11 in terms of overall finish. And at just 21 years old last year, he was 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards and 8th in receiving yards per route run at 2.55. Number 2 in dominator rating in the team's offense. He was good the whole year, but when you even contextualize just how good he was week 10 on, he was a damn near 20 point per game scorer, the kicker, without Trevor Lawrence in the lineup. Again, people might view it like, they're going to take these stats literally. People are going to look at these stats, these splits, and say, well, he's actually better off without Trevor Lawrence. No, it's a rookie wide receiver that showed that level of talent and ceiling week 10 on because he continually got better in his rookie year. It is not because Mac Jones was the starting quarterback. It's because Brian Thomas, the junior, the player, got better. The cons of BTJ, obviously, they add Travis Hunter. We'll talk about in a second, but let's just focus on the macro pros for why we like this offense. Liam Cohen's coming in. Great for Trevor Lawrence. Great for the balance of this offense. Brian Thomas Jr., assuming he is the number 1 wide receiver for this Jacksonville Jaguars team, which I think, based on what we've seen so far, I can feel confident in saying, and we'll talk about Hunter in a second, even if he's just a top 2 target on this team, if Trevor Lawrence takes the step we believe, if Liam Cohen adds stability to this offense like he did with Tampa Bay, 8 might be too low.
Yeah, the reason I have him 8 is just because I think Hunter is better target competition than anybody else in this territory.
Very valid.
And also, like, it's not like Trevor Lawrence is, Joe Burrow or something. He's a good quarterback, and he's one of the better quarterbacks in this range of wide receiver. But I think Matthew Stafford is a better quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, Jared Goff has played better than Trevor Lawrence the last couple of years. So Brian Thomas is 8th, but he's still in this tier, and I would feel very confident, again, if you have a pick at 109 or something like that, getting him in the second round potentially. And I would be comfortable taking him, Brian Thomas, in the first round. I tend to think that Travis Hunter is going to have a significant role, and that's why I would rather get him in the second round.
Well, the upside case I have made multiple times, and people are like, well, if you guys love Travis Hunter and you think he is a gold jacket level prospect, number 2 overall player, prime Odell Beckham Jr. level talent. Yes, I have said that multiple times on the channel. Then how can you have Brian Thomas Jr. so high? Can I point you to the 2018 Pittsburgh Steelers where Juju Smith-Schuster and Antonio Brown were both top 10 scoring PPR receivers that year?
Or JaMarr Chase and T. Higgins, both
or Chris Godwin and Mike Evans.
Top 3 receivers in fantasy on a points per game basis last year.
People think that superstar players can't coexist, but when it's such a concentrated target situation, like, are we expecting Brenton Strange to be a top 12 fantasy tight end? Are we expecting any of these running backs to emerge as a top 12 guy? Heck, look at the ADP right now. All Jaguars running backs are literally in the 30s. Nobody has a clue. Nobody has conviction on what this ground game will look like. You know what we have conviction on? That this pass game will take a leap with Trevor Lawrence working with Liam Cohen.
Yeah, and again, we feel really confident with Brian Thomas Jr., 19.25 PPR points per game, week 10 onward there, like you said. Drake London is the next guy. I have him in this tier. I'm not sure. Do you have him in the tier with these guys, or is he a tier below?
He is the start of the next tier for me.
Okay, so I actually do have him in this tier, and like, you could talk me into him even over Brian Thomas just from a raw PPR point per game standpoint, but wide receiver 13 in PPR points per game this past year, 16.5, but he was better with Penix.
Yeah. In the 5 games that Michael Penix played, I believe 2 of them were like he didn't play fully, but like he made an appearance in. But regardless, like even if you took the last 3 games, it would be even better than 19.32. I just included those 5 because it's more of a sample. 19.32 PPR points per game, and Penix targeted him 10.8 times per game. The upside for London is Zach Robinson's Puka Nacua. He was the reason why he went in the second round of drafts last year, and last year, we had a lot more of an unknown. How would Zach Robinson do as a play caller? Obviously, I mentioned if you guys watched the running back episode with Bijan, quarterback uncertainty, Kirk Cousins' Achilles tear, Michael Penix, rookie year. We still had more hopes in terms of what Kyle Pitts could be at that point. And yet, he hasn't changed in cost, despite a wide receiver 13 point per game year.
Yeah, he had like 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns last year, and I feel like nobody gives a shit.
Nobody gives a shit. And I mean, he's entering year 4, best offensive projection of his career. Young quarterback that we believe in. He's an easy click anywhere after like 15th overall.
Yeah, I believe I have him at 16 or 15. Like I have him and Derrick Henry, I believe, are back-to-back for me. And in PPR leagues, man, Michael Penix is a gunslinger quarterback too. He's going to throw back shoulder fades and deep balls and that kind of thing. Like Cousins was a lot more conservative.
London can run every road on the road tree too.
Yeah, like London also took a huge step as a player last year. Like the fact that, like you said, 10.8 targets per game, 19.32 PPR points per game, 95 yards per game with Michael Penix out there. I get it was like bad defenses and that kind of thing, but I feel really strong. If I start my draft again, let's say at 106, I draft Jahmyr Gibbs or Justin Jefferson, getting Drake London potentially in the mid-second round there on the way back feels really nice, especially in PPR where he could have, like, dude's only 24 years old, man. He could still get better. He could have 170 targets this year.
Yeah, like, realistically, what is stopping him from being Puka Nacua? Like
not much.
Like, ability-wise, sure, you can argue, okay, well, Puka's proven, Drake London still has a little ways to go, but it's like, Drake London's already, for my money, a top 15 level receiver in the league.
Yeah, he's a dude, man. He's an absolute dude. I think he's going to end up being a huge value. I'm going to be drafting him a ton on Underdog, of course. If you guys are wanting to play on Underdog, you want to win $2 million up top to first place, $15 million in total prizes in Best Ball Mania 6. Head to the link in the pinned comment. Use promo code FSE. Sign up. Get up to $1,000 in bonus funds and a free gimme pick. If you guys are watching the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, you can use that right away. Or you could save it for the football season. Again, promo code FSE. That'll be linked down below in the pinned comment and in the description of this video. But wide receiver 10, A.J. Brown, he is actually the start of the next tier for me. But I do think there's a lot of similarities with him and Drake London because A.J. Brown has been a wide receiver 1 in points per game for 4 of his last 5 seasons. And the only one he wasn't, he was really banged up that year. The Eagles' low pass volume is the biggest problem here for A.J. Brown.
Historically low, by the way.
Historically low, and Devonta Smith, of course, is a great player. But that's kind of baked into the cost that you can argue legitimately, and I've heard people do this, that A.J. Brown might be the best receiver in the league. Like one of the 3 to 4 best receivers in the league at the very least.
I personally think the top 4 receivers in the league are the 3 we mentioned at the top and A.J. Brown. I think those are the 4 best talents in the league. If you prefer him to Chase, if you prefer him to Lamb, if you prefer him to Jefferson, like I'll hear you out because I think those 4 guys have really separated themselves. And it is unfortunate that we can't talk about A.J. Brown in that breath because they had a 44% team pass rate last year. And quite simply, I don't see much changing. They have a top overall defense, like top 2, top 3, maybe even the best overall defense in the league. They have the best ground game in the league. They have a great offensive line. They have an 11.5 win over under projection. Like with what worked last year to get them to win the Super Bowl, why would they change? Realistically, A.J. Brown will be efficient in his targets, and we wish that we can see him in a 650 attempt context like Joe Burrow had the Bengals operating at last year. 66% neutral pass rate for the Bengals last year. We are never going to get that for Philadelphia, and it's a true travesty because if we did, he would be contending for the overall wide receiver 1, 22, 23 plus point per game upside.
No, he would, yeah. He's only had 7 receiving touchdowns each of the last 2 years, so maybe get a spike in touchdowns randomly. Jalen Hurts throws 33, 34 touchdowns. Maybe AJ has 13 or something. Yeah. That would obviously be great for him, but his ceiling case does require that kind of mental gymnastics. The only way he gets there is Devonta Smith going down. The Eagles, let's say, get a bunch of defensive injuries or something like that, and they start playing like
Barkley going down.
Yeah, Barkley going down, a random spike in pass volume that we're not expecting. Yeah. That's what it would require for A.J. Brown to be wide receiver 2 in points per game this year. Here's the nice thing. We have him wide receiver 10. It's his floor. He's not finishing below wide receiver 10. If you're drafting wide receiver 10, A.J. Brown, you should feel very confident that that's where he will finish, if not better. And that means he's a good pick where he's going, for what it's worth. Sure. If his floor is where he's being drafted, that means he's a good pick.
Yeah, and I think once you combine him in with the running backs in this range, if you prefer to take a Chase Brown, if you prefer to take a Derrick Henry.
I can't take Chase Brown over A.J. Brown. Not over my dead body would I do that.
I'd be comfortable doing it.
I wouldn't. Why? As much as I like the Chase Brown ceiling, I'm talking about a dude who I think is one of the best at his position in the league.
And I agree. It's just the issue is with the current pass volume. You're looking at a 17 to 18 point per game score. It's we saw Chase Brown be a 21 point per game score down the stretch.
I did, but I do think Chase Brown's median range of outcomes, or even close to his 90th percentile, is probably what A.J. Brown does in his sleep.
Regardless, though, you don't even have to make that decision. I'm just saying if it ended up being by the time August comes that Chase Brown's ADP jumped to that range, I have him ranked above A.J. Brown right now, to be honest. So the fact that you don't have to make that decision just means that Chase Brown's a steal.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move into wide receiver 11 with Ladd McConkey, who I also have very closely ranked with A.J. Brown. Mm-hmm. Very impressive rookie season. It gets a little bit overshadowed by what Thomas and what Nabers and those guys did, but wide receiver 16 in PPR points per game for a guy who was a little banged up as a rookie, did have that, you mentioned in the running back video, that weeks 1 to 7 stretch where they basically didn't pass the ball at all.
Not at all.
And it's not like we expect the Chargers to be pass heavy. They drafted a running back in the first round. They definitely will not be pass heavy. But, Ladd McConkey, when you're the dude on the offense, you're the dude on the offense.
Yeah. And obviously I mentioned 31st in pass rate over expectation, weeks 1 to 7. It's really the glass half full versus glass half empty view of it. Do you think the Chargers are going to operate closer to weeks 1 to 7 or weeks 8 on? If you think they're going to operate closer to weeks 1 to 7, Omari Hampton is the single best pick in fantasy drafts right now. If you think they're going to operate closer to week 8 on, Ladd McConkey was a 19.2 PPR point per game scorer as a rookie and operated as a true alpha wide receiver 1 for Justin freaking Herbert. We saw it in the one playoff game they played. What did he do against Houston?
200 yards, 9 receptions.
9 for 197 and a touchdown. McConkey posted high-end separation metrics as a rookie. You guys can see his reception perception.
It's the best of any rookie, by the way. It's better than Nabers and Thomas in terms of how he separated.
Best of any rookie, and the only big addition to their wide receiver room is a raw rookie wide receiver in round 2 with Trey Harris. If they were not convinced that Ladd McConkey could be their true wide receiver 1 sustainably going forward, they would have thrown more assets than the 55th overall pick they did.
Yeah, they could have drafted Matthew Golden or traded up potentially for an Emeka Buka.
Traded for George Pickens.
Yeah, there was receivers available in free agency.
Signed Davante Adams.
Yeah, they could have signed Davante Adams. They were linked to him. So McConkey had a really good run out. The fact that Trey Harris was the only thing that was added to this receiver core, I think is pretty good run out for what Ladd McConkey had coming into the offseason, because he could have gotten T. Higgins for sure. Like they could have traded up for a receiver or something like that. I saw mock drafts where Tetairoa McMillan fell to 22. Yeah,
and to sum it up like this, I get it. Like we are more so of the belief that the Chargers will be closer to the lower pass rate of over expectation team. Maybe it's not 31, but maybe it's 25 to 32 range, like probably in that area. Yeah. Even if it is low, he had a 24.2% target share as a rookie. If he takes a natural progression as a player, especially if you just took the split from week 8 on, I can assure you it was probably a lot higher than that. We're looking at a guy that can be at the 27, the 28 target share range. Like it feels to me, Ladd McConkey is the profile that we were making the case for with Chris Olave a few years ago, except we have Justin freaking Herbert attached to him.
Yeah, that's a good comp actually, where Olave was going kind of in that mid to late second round range, but we did not have Herbert throwing the football, dude. Like to have a 98th percentile separation rate against press coverage is
for
absurd.
A slender receiver that can't play outside.
Yeah, like for a guy that people called Cooper Kupp or whatever, like it's pretty insane that he separated at that level. And I think McConkey, like maybe you're not comfortable with him as your wide receiver 1, but if I take Bijan or Gibbs or Saquon in the first round, I'm very comfortable grabbing McConkey as my wide receiver 1.
If you're at the 102 and you take Bijan Robinson at 2 and McConkey fell to you at the 211, which is about the range he usually goes 2-3 turn, that's perfect. Maybe he goes a little bit ahead on underdog, but I think honestly, even in your home leagues, it's probably going to be closer to a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, 2-3 turn. I wouldn't be shocked if people are grabbing, JaMarr Chase, Josh Jacobs, Ladd McConkey to start the drafts or whatever. Anyways, we can move in. Speaking of JaMarr Chase, we got T. Higgins, his teammate at wide receiver 12 here, who was wide receiver 5 in points per game last year. A little bit banged up, but he does get his monster extension with the Bengals. 18.5 PPR points per game on the same field as the Triple Crown winner is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, this was, in my opinion, the best case scenario for Higgins. It was always returning to Cincinnati. Like, yeah, maybe you're not the true number 1 in terms of targets. Maybe you're not getting the $40 million per year contract extension that JaMarr Chase got. But you know what you do have? You have elite quarterback play, elite passing volume, not even elite passing volume. You mentioned 66% neutral pass rate, 650 pass attempts last year, by far number 1 in the league.
Which we expect to continue for what it's worth. We don't think the Bengals are going to suddenly start running the ball like crazy.
Yeah, on top of that, again, this is still a very concentrated target hierarchy. Like T. Higgins, despite sharing the field with the Triple Crown winner, had a 24.7% target share, I believe. Actually, I wrote there, 24.9% target share this past year.
Yeah, and like we talked about it for A.J. Brown. We talked about it with other these guys too. Like there is the upside that T. Higgins has, a 20-plus point per game season if JaMarr Chase were to go down with an injury. Yeah. Again, that's baked into his cost. And you do kind of get like a little bit of a standalone role with handcuff appeal. It doesn't really apply to the wide receiver position often, but it does apply to some of your really, really high-end number 2s like Devonta Smith, like T. Higgins, like some of these other guys. So, yeah, I feel really good, man. You start your draft off, again, JaMarr Chase, T. Higgins, maybe in the 4th round, you wrap around, grab Joe Burrow and stack up the whole offense. Like, you're going to be scary to go up against your managed redraft league buddies. And let's say you don't want to stack up that many players on one offense. You can take Bijan Robinson in the 1st round, 2nd round, you wrap around with T. Higgins and Ladd McConkey or whatever, and you feel pretty good about your 2 stack of wide receivers.
Yeah, and him being the 2, like, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because we know it's going to be a concentrated target share. We know the Bengals defense stinks, and we know Burrow is going to throw the shit out of the pigskin.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move into Tyreek Hill, who is the Christian McCaffrey of wide receivers this year, because both Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey, I can argue, are some of the best to play their position from a fantasy perspective over the last decade or so. Hill is just 1 year removed from playing at a borderline MVP level. Like, legitimately, week 1...
He was your vote.
Yeah, I voted. I put a bet on Tyreek Hill to win MVP week 11 of the 2023 season because he was like literally a 25 point per game scorer, like having one of the best seasons we've ever seen. However, last year has sullied the memory of that for a lot of people. Lowest yards per out run of his career, lowest PFF receiving grade of his career. Very interested to see what his reception perception numbers look like because I think that will definitely determine if I think he's washed or if he's fine. Probably a top 2 fantasy wide receiver of the last decade, along with Davante Adams, I would imagine. 4 league-winning seasons. Wide receiver 1 for 7 years in a row leading up to 2024. So what went wrong for Tyreek Hill? Obviously, Tua Tagovailoa goes down with an injury, and that obviously stinks for the whole offense. Tyreek himself had a foot injury in week 7. He had a wrist injury that apparently impacted his ability to catch the football all season. So my question here is, where does Tyreek Hill go right now if last year didn't happen? We wipe everybody's memory clean of the Miami Dolphins in 2024. Where is he being drafted? Because my argument would be he would be among that top 3 tier.
Yeah, if not in that top 3 tier, at the very minimum where the Puka Nacua is going, because I think people would kind of rationalize, hey, listen, these are the top 3 are all in your prime receivers. Right. With minimal risks in terms of potentially declining. I think people would say, well, Tyreek Hill's a slight mini tier after them because there's more risk as an older receiver, kind of like what we saw this year. Like if this year didn't happen, people would make the case, well, it could happen next year. I think that would be the only thing keeping him out of tier 1. But you're right. I mean, we saw the fantasy upside. When this Miami Dolphins offense is healthy, is running at full capacity, we know what the ceiling is. I just think there's more volatility now because we saw the chinks in the armor of the Mike McDaniel Miami offense. We saw the chinks in the armor in terms of the Miami offensive line. And we saw just random usage, like Jonnu Smith's getting force-fed 20-plus PPR points, and the running backs are the main source of the passing game. Like there was a point where Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle this year were just kind of left on the wayside while Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane were running the show.
Yeah, they were like borderline unstartable for like half the year. Like, what does that mean? Like,
Waddle had 750 yards this year.
Yeah, like, it was bad, man. Like, again, we preach drafting for upside, but, like, within reason. I'm not going to say that you draft Tyreek Hill and just assume he's going to be as good as you thought he was going to be going.
It's baked in on this price, though.
It is, though. Yeah, like, you start your draft. Like, think of how scary this would be to play your fantasy opponent. You start your draft with JaMarr Chase, and you draft at the end of the second round Tyreek Hill and Josh Jacobs or some impact running back. Yeah. Like, that's going to scare the crap out of your league mates, man. Like, part of that factors in, especially in managed leagues that you and I play in. People can trade very easily. You know, you could move off of a Tyreek Hill if he doesn't look quite like the same player, but he's producing. We know the Dolphins in September, they're like the best offense in the league every single year during the month of September. So at the very least,
Joe Mixon factor here.
Maybe you could factor in that you're probably feeling good about where Tyreek Hill is at early on in the season. And if maybe you wanted to pivot him for a Puka or a Nabers later on, who's having maybe a slower start to the season, that would maybe factor in. So that would be my other thing with Tyreek Hill is like, you don't have to be like, okay, weeks 1 to 17, he's got to stay healthy the whole year, and 2 has to stay healthy the whole year. Like, if you just draft Tyreek, you're probably going to get his best production right away. So you could always flip him if you're worried about Tua getting hurt, if you're worried about Tyreek himself not playing at the highest level. So he's really interesting, man. He could make or break fantasy drafts this year.
He's a guy I initially had behind, a couple of the other guys that we mentioned on this list, and that we haven't mentioned on this list yet. I moved him up to 13, and I moved another guy up to 14. You guys will see in a minute, but kind of fits the same moniker. And you mentioned top 2 receivers of the decade. Spoiler alert, that guy might be the second one you mentioned there.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move into Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who we'll get to Davante Adams in a second. But JSN, off season of activity in Seattle. We got no Geno, we got no Metcalf, we have Darnold and Cooper Kupp coming in. Is JSN going to have the same impact on this offense that he did with Clint Kubiak as he did with Ryan Grubb? Because they threw the ball a lot. I mentioned it with Kenneth Walker in the running back video, and they still don't have a good offensive line. Like, JSN, obviously young, ascending player. I think that's kind of what keeps me like, I'll just draft him in the early third round because he's a young player and he had a great season.
Well, I mean, the upside here, he takes maybe, that next step. Again, 17% rookie target share. This year we saw 24.1. If that can go up to the 27, 28, 29% range.
I mean, Kupp is kind of washed, man. It could go to 30.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It's like, what's stopping him from being, Jaxon Smith-Brown or Jaxon St. Brown? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what you could see out of JSN because the utilization of him, 8.2 utilization score, PPR point per game total of 18.2 down the stretch last year. And, of course, we saw like mega productive games where he was giving you huge performances as well. Cooper Kupp, is that a negative? Is that a positive? Like the slot usage, that's what we got to worry about here.
I tend to think it's more of a negative than a positive for JSN. Not because I think Cooper Kupp is going to take more work than when we saw from DK Metcalf last year. It's just more so from a macro offensive perspective. I mentioned this in terms of the DK Metcalf loss when it comes to Kenneth Walker on the running back video, but just thinking of it like this. DK opened up so much space underneath for JSN in 2024, inherently gave him more slot usage because DK Metcalf, more of your X wide receiver. JSN stylistically complements him more playing in the slot. The issue I have with Cooper Kupp is that he is incapable of being a full-time outside wide receiver at this point in his career. And JSN was far better in the slot than he was on the outside last year. Shout out Dataroma for actually tweeting this out. I believe it was in early May or late April when he tweeted this. JSN in the slot versus out wide in 2024. In the slot, 23% targets per route run, 2.04 yards per route run, 0.099 first downs per route run. That trailed dramatically when he was playing on the outside.
Right.
Down from 23 to 20% in terms of targets per route run. Down from 2.04 to 1.44 in yards per route run. Down from 0.099 first downs per route run to under 0.07.
Yeah, JSN, between that and like Geno's better than Darnold as well.
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing. The Kubiak hire, again, maybe it makes the offense more efficient, but I think volume-wise, we're definitely expecting a downtick there. But he is 23 years old, and he flashed really strong performance last year. And in PPR leagues, I mean, you're looking at potentially 8, 9, 10 targets a game. Yeah. So it's hard to rank him lower than this, but I do want him as my second receiver, ideally. Like if you drafted, JaMarr Chase in the first round, you draft Josh Jacobs or something in the second round, you want to take JSN at the 301. I think that probably makes sense. I don't really want to rely on this guy as like my wide receiver 1, for example.
Yeah, and we mentioned, our consensus wide receiver 4 earlier with Justin Jefferson. Now we got our consensus wide receiver 3 with Garett Wilson.
Yeah, no, that's not going to be the case this year. I mean, I will say, Garett Wilson, the most dog shit wide receiver 18 points per game season you'll ever see, according to the perception of Garett Wilson. 101 catches, 1,104 receptions, and 7 touchdowns seemed a lot worse last year. If you had Garett Wilson on your team, if you were watching the Jets, the vibes were horrible. The locker room was awful. They basically jettisoned the coaching staff for no apparent reason. The coaching a QB cancer issue that they had last year. Did Garett Wilson outperform Justin Jefferson? Absolutely the fuck not. Did he have a good season? Probably not even that either. But is Justin Fields and Aaron Glenn and the whole situation seem better right now? I would argue it does. Like, he has chemistry with Garett Wilson going back to college at Ohio State. Wilson has absolutely no opportunity for target competition around him. Like, Breece Hall is his biggest competition for targets.
Yeah, running back.
Maybe they'll trade for Chris Olave and get the whole gang back together from Ohio State. But
is that a rumor right now?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. What's stopping a 150-plus target again season from Garett Wilson? Only maybe with some actual efficiency. Justin Fields, say what you want about him. DJ Moore had his best season with Justin Fields. He was a top 10 receiver in points per game.
He had like almost 1,400 receiving yards. Again, that is a big projection to say Garett Wilson's going to have, 96 receptions, 1,400 yards. But he literally already had more receptions last year. Maybe he gets some more downfield usage. And on top of that, like you said, Breece Hall is his main competition for targets right now. They didn't draft Tyler Warren at 7. I think, Mason Taylor should have a role in this team, but if Tyler Warren was there at 7, we could say, well, there's a clear, day one contributor at tight end. I think Mason Taylor, he can develop into that. In fact, he might be a very good sleeper that you're drafting.
It's more of a dynasty thing than a redraft thing, I think.
And it's more of an ancillary target thing. Like, Mason Taylor isn't going to be on the field to take targets from Garett Wilson. Mason Taylor's going to be on the field to give Justin Fields another option to throw the football to. Everything we've heard from the Jets this offseason, from Aaron Glenn, from Tanner Engstrom, from the entirety of the Jets front office, is that they want to continuously feed Garett Wilson the football. Aaron Glenn, in his recent presser, literally said that we want to continue feeding Garett Wilson the football. As long as he gets the volume, sure, does he maybe have the top 5 ceiling that we thought was in store last year? Probably fucking not.
I still think he does, man. I still think that Wilson has...
Maybe not with Fields, though.
Yeah, maybe not, but I still think Garett Wilson has just as much of a ceiling as not Jefferson, not Chase, not Lamb. But I do think at his absolute best, the volume that Garett Wilson has commanded, the most targets in NFL history through 3 seasons of an NFL career. I mean, the dude can be just as good, in my opinion, as like a Nacua, as a Nabers, as those guys on his high-end range of outcomes that Justin Fields plays like he did when DJ Moore had his best season. He doesn't have
Davante Adams next to him either.
No, yeah, and that was a big part of it. Dude, the guy was fine last year. He wasn't bad. He wasn't great, but I think more than anything, was mentally dejected from having Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, kind of the soul sucker, took all the vibes out of the locker room. Jets were like this fun upstart team. Robert Saleh's leading the charge a couple years ago, and guess what? Aaron Rodgers comes in, and now that guy's no longer even on the coaching staff.
Yeah, no, it's brutal. Anyways, let's move into Marvin Harrison Jr., who is the next guy up on the list here. I think after you've moved Adams, he would probably hop Marvin, if I'd imagine.
So where do you have Adams and Marvin respectively? Because I moved Adams to 14.
I think he would hop Marvin. So let's talk about Adams first, because I think I have Marvin at 16 and I have Adams at 18. But if you have Adams at 14, then I believe he would hop him. So let's go with Adams first. Moves over to Los Angeles Rams in a shocking move this offseason, because Cooper Kupp, we expected Kupp probably to get jettisoned away from the Rams, but I didn't expect him to go out and get like a hammer like Davante Adams to replace him.
And this was the big change in my rankings, because once I actually like rolled up the sleeves, dove into these notes, really did my research on the situations, I'm like, why do I have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jaxon Smith-Njigba ranked above Davante Adams? Davante Adams last year, get this, wide receiver 9 in PPR points per game, despite starting the year on the frickin' Raiders and then moving over to the Jets, which was, like I said, dumpster fire. Vibes are awful. Now he moves over to the Rams. Obviously, a shocker this offseason, replaces Cooper Kupp. I think he is, at this point, a far superior player to what Kupp was last year in what should be an extremely consolidated target hierarchy. It's Puka Nacua. It's Davante Adams. It is everybody freaking else on this Rams passing attack. And like you mentioned earlier, we both think Matthew Stafford is a top 10 level quarterback, is the best quarterback Davante has played with since 2021 Aaron Rodgers. And Adams, like I said, wide receiver 9 in points per game in 2024 after splitting time. It's not like he played the whole year with the Jets. It's not like he played the whole year with the Raiders. He literally got traded and was still a top 10 wide receiver across the full year, even having to, learn some of the offense with the Jets. Obviously him and Rodgers always had chemistry. That was never an issue, but the ins and outs, having to battle with Garett Wilson. Like, people might be saying, well, now he goes to Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is a dominant one. It's like Garett Wilson had 150 targets last year. It's not like Davante Adams wasn't producing last season with inferior quarterback play than 2025 Matthew Stafford, playing next to a guy that can command 10 targets per game. The Rams literally decided, they had a decision this offseason. Do we match Cooper Kupp, 3 for $45 million that he signed with our division rival? Another thing, it's not like he went to the Cowboys. It's not like he went to an AFC team. It's not like he went even to a different NFC West team. I would argue the Seahawks and the 49ers are the two biggest competitors to the Rams this season in their own division. And instead of matching Cooper Kupp's deal to their biggest rival, they instead opted to give more money on less term to Davante Adams. Davante Adams can win outside. Davante Adams can win as an X wide receiver. Davante Adams can separate against man coverage, and he gives the most fearsome 2 wide receiver look that Matthew Stafford has had to operate with since even when? Like, I can't even think of a situation Matthew Stafford has had that has had 2 wide receivers of this talent at the same time.
Yeah, no, I would argue that if you're going to have Adams at 14, you should maybe have Puka the last of that tier 2 wide receivers.
Yep.
But even still, like you said, consolidated target share, Stafford, all that good stuff. I feel pretty confident in Davante Adams myself. I do prefer, Marvin and, some of the other guys in this range, but it's close, man. Like, especially when you factor in just like watching the 2 guys play football last year. Like, Marvin's got a prayer if Marvin looks like Davante Adams last year, he's going to end up being really, really dominant.
Well, it's a similar factor with, for example, you mentioned with Puka and Adams. Like, I think it's going to be very similar to Chase and Higgins. Like, again, the passing volume might be different, but you also have the factor that if Puka were to miss any time, like he literally did last year,
Adams would be a league winner.
Top 5 receiver.
Yeah, he'd be dominant in that situation. So, I feel really good about him. I mean, let's talk about Harrison, because Harrison is like a lot of risk compared to some of the guys that we've talked about already, because objectively, he was like the 30th to 40th best receiver in the league last year. Like, objectively, Marvin Harrison. Like, the underdog guys, shout out to them. I saw Josh and Hayden breaking down like his film and like how good his season was and all this kind of stuff. And basically what they said about him was like, if Marvin Harrison's going to win at the NFL level at an elite rate, because that's anything short of an elite receiver is a disappointment for Marvin Harrison.
He's the number 4 pick. He was one of the best prospects we have ever seen come out.
Right. He has to be Davante Adams, which is win on route precision and timing, and he bulked up this offseason, so being a little bit stronger at the catch point would definitely be great.
So, sorry to cut you off, but that was another thing, too. He was one of the least efficient yak players in the league last year, so adding some bulk could really improve his yards after catch ability, too.
Well, and here's why he needs to do that, is because he just simply doesn't play as fast as Ladd McConkey or Malik Nabers or Brian Thomas or those other guys. And, he didn't run a 40, so we have no idea how fast he was, but he was probably a mid-4.5s guy, realistically. So he needs to be the smartest guy on the field, like his father was. He needs to be the route precision guy like Davante Adams. His best outcome is turning into Davante Adams. So I like the situation. I like the quarterback play. I like Kyler Murray. I think him and Marvin could develop more chemistry this year. I think him and Trey McBride are a good 1-2 tandem as far as like target leaders of the team. But how good is Harrison really? That's what it comes down to. I think third round's capable, or stomachable risk for that. But it wouldn't shock me if people were like, "Oh my God, why the hell did we take Harrison over Davante Adams?"
And that was why I ended up moving him below Davante Adams, because I did have him higher. I'm like the upside. But it's like, okay, well, Davante Adams has a ton of upside. The upside that I'm saying here is more so just, he's 23 versus Davante Adams is near 31.
He's like 32 right now.
32, whatever. Like the only thing for me as to why I had Harrison above Adams was the age. So I had to look myself in the mirror and realize, like, I would take Davante Adams if I'm on the clock. That doesn't take away from the fact that if Marvin Harrison Jr. does hit, like, he could take the CeeDee Lamb route of development. And stylistically, if he were to become a superstar player, how similar does it look like to CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I mean, CeeDee Lamb is like a 4-5 guy too, so it's not like the same.
4-5 too.
Yeah, Harrison's hard, man. He's really difficult to figure out. He is. If you draft Harrison, you better draft.
He might be untradeable.
He might be untradeable, but like if you think of the rest of your team, like a risk portfolio, he's the type of guy you draft in round 3 after drafting Amon-Ra in the first round and Derrick Henry in the second round.
Well, it's funny because I mentioned to you, I recently went to the bank to go look at my investment options. So obviously, you got your low risk where, technically speaking, if you leave it in the account, you're probably going to actually lose money because of the cost of living going up. Like the 2.5% that I get on that account is going to be less than the cost of living is a year from time. So the safety of it is just having the money accessible. Then you got your medium risk where you're making better returns, but there's more risk of losing your money. Marvin Harrison Jr. would be the high risk savings account.
Yeah.
That is the generalization.
He's investing into a penny stock with Jordan Belfort, and Danny's putting the stock exchange in Fantasy Stock Exchange right now with some investment talk. But
hey, you're the accounting guy, so I had to relate a little bit too. I had to show my stripes in some capacity.
Yeah, if you like big risk, big reward, Marvin Harrison's your guy. If you're a risk averse drafter, I would not draft him in the third round.
No, there's a very real possibility you put 10,000 to Marvin Harrison stock, it's worth 20,000 next year, or it's worth 2,000.
Yeah, no, he could, if he finished wide receiver 36 in points per game this year, it wouldn't totally shock me. I don't think it'll happen because I believed in the prospect. I think his game was always, winning with precision, winning with, smarts and that kind of thing. And like that's
at the catch point.
That's gonna take longer to develop than a guy who wins with raw ability like Malik Nabers or Brian Thomas.
Yeah, some guys just move different and are easier separators. It's like, separating isn't going to come as easily for Marv, just simply based off the way he's built and the way he moves. Like, he doesn't have those quick twitch hamstring fibers that Malik Nabers, Travis Hunter has, McConkey has. But however, that doesn't take away the fact that CeeDee Lamb doesn't have those quick twitch fibers. Justin Jefferson, like, he's a little bit smoother of a mover. I would say he's a 4-4 guy, but it's not like he moves like Malik Nabers.
Yeah, and Puka doesn't have like elite speed either. Like, he's the type of guy. Yeah, Drake London didn't have elite speed. So we could go on and on. Let's get into Mike Evans. We know the story, 1,000 yards every single year.
May as well get the jersey.
Yeah, literally. Despite missing 3 games last year, he had 11 plus touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 seasons. He's had over 11 touchdowns. The target share is not elite. If you are looking for target volume, and this is why he's probably better for standard and half PPR than he is for full PPR, he's going to have anywhere between 1,100 and 1,300 yards, assuming he stays healthy. Spike weeks from touchdowns, big performances. Mike Evans, you can bet your bottom dollar, will have a 30-point game next year. It always happens every single year.
Probably 3 or 4.
Probably 3 or 4. One of the most prolific passing offenses in the NFL is why you take Mike Evans, because Chris Godwin is coming off of a major injury, significant ankle issue. Emeka Egbuka, as much as I think he's one of the most pro-ready receivers in the draft, he is still a rookie. He might have some growing pains. I would expect Mike Evans to start fast, in addition to being just good all year, because we feel comfortable that the Buccaneers have the 10th easiest schedule in the NFL. They just invite shootouts. Like, we're going to score a lot against the Falcons. We're going to score a lot against the Panthers, the Saints, the Bucks. Those games, and the Bucks and the Texans, the Falcons and the Texans the first 2 weeks, likely going to be fireworks from Mike Evans. And what you get out of Mike Evans, too, is the tradability factor that he's been so consistent. Everybody loves to buy into Mike Evans.
McConkey struggles out of the gate. You can trade Evans for him, probably.
Absolutely, man. Evans is just such an easy projection. I don't even really feel like we need to spend much time on him. The Bucs are going to be a good offense, and Mike Evans, at the beginning of the season especially, is probably going to get out to a nice start.
Yeah, and you summed it up with Evans, 18. Like, he's going to finish above 18. It's just a matter of having, the 17 guys that we have ranked ahead of him, maybe a little bit comparable. A guy like Adams.
We could look so stupid for having Marvin Harrison ahead of Mike Evans. We could look moronic.
It's baking in the projections with the steady guys. Like Evans, would be in that tier with the Davante Adams range of older receivers, steady producers that we know are going to be able to go out there. Feeling more so the Marvin Harrison riskier profile, which, although I don't really think it's much of a risk given the talent.
I mean, I do because he's a rookie and he's
fair. And I guess
defense.
maybe we said this about Marv last year. The only difference is I don't think Travis Hunter will be nearly as expensive as Marv was. Even in casual leagues, Marv was a top 15 overall pick in a lot of them, especially where he was listed on Sleeper. Travis Hunter right now on Sleeper is a 5th round pick. On Best Ball, he is a 4th round pick. You're getting him at a much cheaper cost, and he's stepping into a much better offensive situation. Really, for me, outside of the cornerback wide receiver split that everybody's up in arms about right now, what other negative is there to taking Travis Hunter genuinely? The talent level is there. Liam Cohen's coming over from an offensive perspective. Outside of Brian Thomas Jr., there's a wide open target hierarchy for him to be a top 2 target immediately on this team. He has all the makings to completely smash. The only risk is the matter of how much of the split is there right away. But judging from everything we have heard already this offseason, Liam Cohen said they want to start him at wide receiver. James Gladstone said they want to start him at wide receiver. They go up, trade from number 5 to go and pay a legitimate top end $40 million per year level player price. Guess what? No cornerback in the league is making $40 million per year. You know who's making $40 million per year? JaMarr Chase.
Yeah. Also, somebody link a clip of him playing corner in practice because I haven't seen one. Every clip I'm seeing of him is him playing wide receiver, and I think that's because he's going to play wide receiver primarily at the next level, and he'll be a nickel DB or whatever. They'll mix him in on defense, whatever the case is. But yeah, the only
end of halves.
If Harrison had crushed last year at his price tag, I think Hunter would be a full round more expensive.
Yeah, he'd probably be legitimately a 2-3 turn pick, but because Marvin Harrison didn't play well and people are hearing generational next to Harrison, now they're hearing generational next to Travis Hunter, it's affecting them. But really, the question of, well, one of them has to see to the other with BTJ or Hunter, so who's the true answer? My answer is both. I think both these guys, like we mentioned, Juju and Antonio Brown, Godwin and Evans. We have seen historical precedent of 2 elite wide receivers playing next to each other. And under the tutelage of Liam Cohen, under a quarterback that we believe can take the ascension to be a top 12 level option by this time next year, nothing's stopping me from taking him inside the top 20 at wide receiver.
Yeah, just look at what Godwin was doing as the PPR chain mover in the Bucs offense last year. That's the role.
2023 LSU.
That's the role that Hunter is going to be playing. He's going to be playing the Godwin role in the offense. That is extremely valuable target volume, especially when you're as explosive after the catch, great of hands, not afraid to go over the middle. Hunter's, this is high, obviously. People might be shocked by how high we have him ranked, but I mean, he goes this high on Underdog, where all the sharp drafters are, and in your home leagues, just take the discount. You get him in the 5th, 6th round because your league mates are he's going to play cornerback half the time or whatever. Take the discount.
Well, hey, guess what? How is Brian Thomas Jr. going to coexist next to Travis Hunter? How is Travis Hunter going to coexist next to Brian Thomas Jr.? I mean, what happened on the 2023 LSU Tigers? And I would argue that Travis Hunter and Malik Nabers stylistically are very similar.
Yeah, no, they absolutely are. So let's move into another old reliable with Terry McLaurin here. 13 touchdowns was a major outlier in terms of what he's done to that point in his career, but it's probably because he finally had a functional quarterback in Jaden Daniels last year. 15.8 PPR points per game, wide receiver 14 overall. We are a smidge behind market on Terry McLaurin, who is at wide receiver 16 ADP. I think part of it is because he kind of did run hot on touchdowns last year. And even if he, let's say, had 1,400 yards instead of 1,200 yards or whatever, you're probably going to be offset by only having 8 or 9 touchdowns or whatever. Air yards, end zone targets, deep targets, everything should be there for Terry McLaurin. He is the type of player that you draft if you took a risk in another place, like you took Harrison the round before, or you took Hunter in the next round or something like that. He's a risk mitigation selection because I feel very confident that Terry McLaurin will be a top 20 to 24 receiver this year. But I don't really see him being much better than wide receiver 12 to 15 because we saw last year on 13 touchdowns and Jaden having as great of a season as he did. What if he has a sophomore slump? What if offenses kind of figure him out a little bit?
Split between him and Debo is a lot closer.
He also had no target competition last year with Debo Samuel coming in. That could change a little bit. We'll see, Ertz and Eckler and those guys contribute in the passing game. So McLaurin, yeah, you're probably getting 14 to 16 and a half points per game out of him. But if you need that, if you feel confident he's your wide receiver 3 or something, you just want a good, solid producer, McLaurin's your guy.
Well, to me, when I'm looking at it, it's going to be a low passing volume offense. As much as we love Jaden Daniels, it's going to be efficient passing volume. Don't get me wrong. He showed himself to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but it's not like they're going to go out there and throw the ball 550, 600 plus times. It is going to be a run-based offense. And both Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel are kind of fitting that like Devonta Smith role in the Eagles, like in terms of contextualizing it. So it's like both Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel are closer to Devonta Smith than they are to an AJ Brown, except the difference in cost right now is wide receiver 16 versus somebody with Deebo Samuel that is being selected in the 30s.
Yeah, exactly. Like you feel pretty confident that you're getting what you want out of Terry McLaurin. Risk-averse drafters will love him. I like him. I'll take him if my league mates don't want to draft him in like the 4th round or whatever, but I probably want to have like some legendary upside swings before I draft McLaurin. Like let's say I draft Bijan Robinson, AJ Brown, and then in the 3rd I take a risk and I go with Marvin Harrison or something like that. And then Terry's my wide receiver 3, and I feel confident in a full PPR league that he's going to be a solid option. Yeah,
but moving on, I mentioned, the A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith in terms of like there's an alpha and there's a really good 1B in that situation. Whereas I view with Washington, it's kind of like they're both 1Bs. Devonta Smith, I think in the majority of other situations, like if he was on Washington right now, he would be their number 1 wide receiver, in my opinion.
Yeah, and taking a slam dunk wide receiver 2 in both cases here, I think is sometimes a good thing, especially, draft for upside, all that kind of stuff. But
balance your portfolio.
Yeah, wide receiver 14, 20, and 15 the last 3 seasons for Devonta Smith. He's a full round after Terry McLaurin and ADP. So I actually like him better. Same. In a vacuum, I have him ranked higher, but especially at cost when I could take a deviation to like an elite tight end or something like that and then get Smith around later. In the 2 games that A.J. Brown missed last year, he had 18 points per game. So when the floor is where he's being drafted, which is wide receiver 20 to 23, because that's, in my opinion, the floor for Devonta Smith. I think the Eagles are going to be dominant again.
He's not going to be like wide receiver 28 in points per game if he's healthy.
No. The floor is where he's being drafted. That makes him a good pick. What if the Eagles throw the ball a little bit more this year? We don't know. That the defense could suffer some injuries. They're in more shootouts, whatever. Barkley goes down maybe. They don't run the ball as much. A.J. Brown gets hurt for a couple of games. Maybe we see Devonta Smith's production spike at the right time, like week 13. A.J. Brown goes down. Devonta Smith wins people leagues kind of thing. What happens? Jalen Hurts has an outlier touchdown spike and Devontae has 10 or 11 touchdowns. Production, confidence boost for Jalen Hurts. They just won a championship. They got the monkey off their back there. Draft upside with your other picks and eat your veggies with Devonta Smith. That's the way I look at it. I think he is one of the best picks in the 5th round because you can have 3 or 4 really, really good high upside players already.
Yeah, I think he's super steady. I have him a little bit after what you do, but at the same time, I can acknowledge that top 24 level projection, that's exactly where we're at with Devonta Smith. I believe he's my 23 and he's your, probably 19 or 20?
I have him 18 or 19, yeah. And it's partially because why would I draft a safe running back like Alvin Kamara or Kenneth Walker when I could draft a safe receiver like Devonta Smith, who inherently is not going to get injured as much because he's a wide receiver?
Yeah, it depends on the flavor. Like I said, you want to balance your portfolio. You don't want all risk, but you also don't want all safety. It's like if you take a Devonta Smith after you took maybe a Tyreek Hill, that could be kind of like a good balance. Yeah. You're betting on the upside with Tyreek Hill and Devonta Smith if he's healthy, can kind of offset some of that risk. Speaking of risk, and we mentioned Devonta Smith being your eat your veggies guy. If you ate your veggies earlier in the draft and you're willing to take more of the upside that we literally saw on display in the first 4 weeks of last year, this is where Rashee Rice finds his way. Now, we're recording this in May. There's a very real possibility by August we're talking about this guy as a top 12 to 15 receiver.
Yeah, and we don't know. I don't think he's going to get suspended, first off. Let me just put it this way. I saw Drew Davenport talking about this. It looks like it's going to be a civil suit, which doesn't usually result in disciplinary action from the NFL. So let's just get that off the top right away. The issue with Rashee Rice is the injury, not the suspension, most likely. Only A.J. Brown and Malik Nabers scored more PPR points through weeks 1 to 3 last year before Rashee Rice had his dolphin dive quarterback run at his knee. The suspension is not an issue anymore.
That bit was legendary, by the way.
If you look at this tweet from Dr. Jesse Morrison, a lot of the fantasy doctors on Twitter are in line with this. It is not an ACL tear. A lot of people thought he tore his ACL. It's a grade 3, LCL tear. The LCL ligament, the hamstring, those were the structural issues of the knee, but it doesn't appear his meniscus, ACL, all that other stuff are going to be major issues for him. Rashee Rice, when he's on the field, when Mahomes is operating this offense the way he's been the last couple of years, which is we're going to take what defenses give us. They're scared of the big play. Having the fastest receiver in the freaking world doesn't hurt when you're Rashee Rice, who's going to take the top off the defense, stretch the defense out vertically. Rice could catch 115 passes next year if he's healthy. Again, not an ACL tear. Not an ACL tear. The recovery is more of a 8 to 10 month recovery than it is a 10 to 12 month recovery for an ACL construction surgery that he received. So again, it's slightly better than an ACL tear. It's still a bit of a concern, but if he's out there training camp, no problem, no knee issues, I'd feel very comfortable drafting him.
And the other thing too, no knee issues. It's like he could be healthy in week 1, but it could be like a Chris Godwin situation a few years ago. If you remember, even I believe it was actually the game that we went to in Dallas was his first game after the ACL tear. That
he suffered that in December too, which was also factoring in that Rashee Rice suffered his injury at the beginning of October.
Like, we're not saying there isn't risk here. Like, he could very well get re-nicked up, this and that. Again, this is something to monitor in August. And the more positive we hear on Rashee Rice, the higher he'll get, maybe the lower Xavier Worthy will get. If we hear more negative, more pessimism on Rashee Rice, the higher Xavier Worthy gets, the lower Rashee Rice gets. Right now, we kind of have them relatively close range. But if Rashee Rice ends up as our wide receiver 13 by this time in August, it's like that will take the negative effect on Worthy. We'll touch upon Worthy in a second. He actually does make our top 25. Just kind of want to get that out there for people that maybe were questioning seeing 2 Chiefs in this range.
Yeah, absolutely. And I prefer Rice for sure. I have him actually a little bit further ahead of where I have Worthy. I think they're like Rice is in my fringe top 16, 17, 18 receivers, and then Worthy more so in my back end 20s. Just because I do think the way that the Chiefs like to run their offense these days is not stretching the defense out vertically. And a lot of what Worthy's best production came from was when Rice was out of the lineup.
And horizontally, to be fair.
He can, but like I do think with Rice back, they'll probably kind of reserve him a little bit more as like a deep threat, which is great. He's going to have big plays and all that kind of stuff for best ball, but in full PPR,
we'll talk about him in a second.
Think Rice is going to be just an absolute animal in full PPR leagues. But we could talk about McMillan first, and then we'll get into Worthy.
Yeah, and spoiler, again, Tetairoa McMillan, he isn't Travis Hunter. That doesn't mean he's not an incredible wide receiver prospect in his own right. 8th overall to the Panthers, number 1 wide receiver for Bryce Young. Bryce Young reportedly handpicked him. Like on draft night, they asked Bryce Young, who do you want at 8th overall? Because again, the rumor for the longest time was, they might go defense. Jalon Walker, maybe they take Walter Nolan. Like there were a lot of rumors about the Panthers going defense, but apparently Bryce Young said to Canales, said to the front office, if Tetairoa McMillan is there at 8, this is the guy that I want. And they stuck true to their board and they take him. And I think he figures mostly into that X wide receiver spot this year. Allows guys like Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen maybe to use more inside, maybe be used more in space. And I can assume that Canales met with McMillan and he was enamored by the potential that he saw with Tet. Because he saw a guy that can play the Mike Evans looks from the Buccaneers 2023 offense. The difference with Tet, though, is that he can also do the other stuff. He can play in slide. He can transition to big slot. He can give you some of that Drake London look to your offense. With Tetairoa McMillan, he offers the best of both worlds, being able to play that pure X and deliver down the field, but also be that layup inside the hashes, yards after catch guy in the slot. That makes him such a unique, versatile weapon for what we view to be one of the highest projectable ascending offenses. Not in terms of projectable like the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Ravens, like not like up to like top 5, top 8 overall levels, but in terms of what we saw last year versus what they could be this year, one of the easiest, most ascending offenses we can project this season.
Yeah, it's impossible for me to like Bryce as much as I do and not like McMillan, because McMillan is going to be the number 1 of that team. You don't spend top 10 pick capital when you think Xavier Legette can be your number 1 receiver. I have seen the tape on Xavier Legette. He's got a long ways to go before we can consider him target competition. Same goes for Jalen Coker. Great story, undrafted free agent. I like Jalen Coker, but McMillan and Thielen is probably the best receiver on the team still at this moment. And until you see McMillan out there being the number 1 receiver, I've also made the comp too that Tet McMillan has played with Walmart, Bryce Young his whole career, Noah Fafita in high school and in college. Dude, McMillan, you get him on deep crossing routes, use him in those type of routes that, Dave Canales, when he came from Seattle, they used DK Metcalf a little bit more in that regard than they have since.
Yep.
And then same goes for what we've seen with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as bigger receivers there. I think McMillan can be like, it wouldn't shock me if I told you that the Panthers were a top 15 offense this year and Tet McMillan had 145 targets. Like, we might be like, holy crap, wins above replacement type of, looking back at this, by week 7, week 8 of the regular season, we might be routinely ranking him as a top 12 guy.
We might be kicking ourselves for taking like JSN over him. Yeah, and with that, yeah, like, sure. You mentioned Xavier Legette. They used their 2024 first round pick on Legette. We both had him as a top 10 receiver. We both were extremely ecstatic, but at this point after his rookie season, it's probably closer to like a Quentin Johnson type of perspective or a type of projection, than he is to be a DK Metcalf number 1 receiver.
Yeah, no, I think they probably sealed Xavier Legette's fate as, hey, we'll see what we get out of you, but like we can't just like sit around and let you develop when
it's
we
not
have
a bad thing to be QJ.
We have a young quarterback who we have to make decisions on here coming soon, and we need to get him a dude, and McMillan is a dude.
Dude, QJ for where he was drafted in best ball last year was actually a pretty good bang for your buck. Like, it's not bad to be a number 2, number 3 ancillary spike week guy. Like, I don't mind Legette later on in best ball, but it's very clear he is not going to be the number 1 receiver here.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving off of McMillan, we can get into Xavier Worthy and then into the like final couple guys that caught the back of this list and or just missed out. Worthy, we already kind of mentioned with the Chiefs offense. He was the big beneficiary for sure of Marquise Brown missing the entire season and Rashee Rice missing week 4 onwards pretty much. And he started out slow. He was a young player. He was a raw prospect. Horrific Monday Night Football game against my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He posted -1 PPR points, had a bunch of drops and all that kind of stuff. But down the stretch, man, he was really good.
I lost a fantasy game to him because I believe it was 1.2 points in my home league from Xavier Worthy on Monday Night Football. And I lost by more than I went into Monday Night Football going into it. Like, it was ridiculous. -1 PPR points. He had his lowlights. It looked like after that game, like we were at a crossroads in Dynasty, in redraft. Is this guy droppable? In Dynasty, is he worth a 3rd round pick? Week 10 on, he did take the step we wanted to see. Again, slender receiver, maybe was overwhelmed by the physicality of the game right away. Week 10 on, 14.3 PPR points per game. And that doesn't even include the playoffs. Where in the playoffs, he took a big-time step. 287 yards, 3 touchdowns in 3 playoff games. More importantly, caught 19 of his 21 targets. Targets that are down the field. Valuable targets from the best quarterback in the NFL. He was actually catching them. Now, obviously, there is risk. When Rashee Rice is healthy, he's the clear number 1 on this team. But Travis Kelce's getting older. Hollywood Brown's coming off a year where he basically had a lost year, barely played, came in, I believe, week 16 it was against the Texans, never really looked like himself. And to me, Worthy is still their most dynamic deep threat on this offense. If Mahomes does get up, steps up to the type of passing production we have seen in the past, and Worthy can truly establish himself into a top 2 wide receiver on this team, the upside is big. We've seen Mahomes deliver in these situations before. We both believe Worthy is a talented enough player. It's just the fact of the matter is he ready to be a number 2 target? Because if he is, 24 feels like a very, very good value on him. If he isn't, we're taking a project wide receiver over some steady-made options.
Yeah, he's a tough projection, man, because I really do think, we could be talking about the most underrated wide receiver duo in the league, potentially. Like, even if Rashee Rice is back and playing at a high level, like, think about the run out for Patrick Mahomes last year and why the Chiefs maybe weren't that great of an offense. You have Rashee Rice go down in week 4 after he was looking like he was going to be an absolute league winner. Kelce is not really playing that well. Hollywood Brown missed the entire season. First snap of the preseason, he busts his shoulder up. And Xavier Worthy looked really raw. Fast forward to this year. If Rice is back healthy, Worthy in his 2nd year, Hollywood's back healthy, Kelce's still there. He's still going to move the chains and that kind of stuff. You have Noah Gray and some other ancillary receivers. Pacheco also missed most of the season last year. You're starting running back. So it was a poor run out for the Kansas City Chiefs. The fact that they made the Super Bowl after what happened last year is just utmost more impressive than anything else.
Devil magic.
But the receiving production and the passing production was the worst of Mahomes' career. And it's probably just because everybody went down.
Yeah, everybody went down. Travis Kelce ain't 2022 Travis Kelce anymore. In fact, 2024, he looked like an old man. He looked like a guy that was happily getting married. I mean, they aren't married yet, but they're engaged, right? Him and Kelce?
I don't think so.
Regardless, though, you could tell he was in a relationship, packed a few pounds, wasn't moving the same. He was enjoying himself, which... Why wouldn't you when you got a billionaire superstar wife or girlfriend?
Future wife. We'll see.
They're going to get married. Let's be real.
Yeah, they are. Anyways, let's move into wide receiver 25. Final guy of this territory. We'll briefly mention the guys that just missed. Obviously, wide receivers deeper than 25 names. So you want our full rankings. They'll be available on Flock for best ball drafts right now. And obviously, once we get into more redraft-centric time of year, we'll have those. Zay Flowers is a wide receiver 25 for us. I believe he's my 22 or 23, so he's a little bit higher for me
28
than he is for you. He's been a functional top 31, I believe, wide receiver the last 2 years. This is another eat your veggies wide receiver for me, where in round 5, round 6, you just take Zay Flowers and you don't think twice about it, especially you and I play in leagues, full PPR, 4 wide receiver, 5 wide receiver starts. Zay Flowers is perfect for those type of leagues. Touchdowns have not been spectacular. 5, I believe, his rookie season, 4 last year. He has left some plays out on the field, but 1,059 yards last season. He's still just 24 years old, man, and he's entering his prime. Year 3, as a rookie, he posted a 90th percentile success rate against zone coverage. We don't have his reception perception numbers for this year yet, but he is an MVP caliber quarterback who's quietly ranked top 3 in adjusted yards per pass attempt. Lamar Jackson, the last 2 years. Lack of pass volume is baked in. Zay Flowers not really having touchdown volume and that kind of stuff is baked in. You're getting this guy like tail end of round 5. Yeah. Like, and he could be he is already the number 1 receiver for Lamar Jackson. But what happens if he takes that ascension to become a 1,300 yard, 8 touchdown receiver?
And I think that's my biggest question mark with Zay, because at this point, I don't think he is a true number 1 wide receiver. Like, I think like when you think of number 1s, like even like a guy like T. Higgins, I would classify.
Well, what if he plays like a Rashee Rice level role in this offense?
And he very well could. Again, we already talked about the volume, but I do think it's a lot better of an overall pass catching core than we're kind of contextualizing on top of the volume. Like, for example, we mentioned with Philadelphia, obviously Devonta Smith, you only really have to worry about an AJ Brown. Or an AJ Brown, you only have to worry about Devonta Smith, but it's a very concentrated situation. With Baltimore, I mean, we saw Bateman flash the best year of his career last year. We saw Mark Andrews have 11 receiving touchdowns. We saw Isaiah Likely chip in on top of already being a low passing volume team. For me, like, Flowers just needs to take the step and go over the top, prove himself as the clear above all number 1. If he goes out there and he does it this year, I can have him higher. It's just for me, until he does it, there are better number 1 options in this range, in my opinion.
Yeah, again, I have him ranked at 22. He's going around.
It's a very close range.
25 to 28 is about where he goes. Yeah. To me, 25 to 28 would indicate that's about where he's going to project on like a lower range of outcomes. Fair. What happens if 31-year-old Derrick Henry misses a couple games and they got to throw the ball a little bit more? You know what I mean? Like there's outs to me for Flowers to get better as a player, Lamar to have another great year, Henry maybe to go down for a couple of games, maybe the pass volume spikes because of injuries on defense. Yeah. We don't exactly know. I just think that, you know, if Flowers went out there and had like wide receiver 13 in PPR points per game season, I don't want to miss out on that because I overthought the pass volume.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. The only counter I guess I would have is when we go to the just miss section. There are a lot of guys that you can make that exact
There's so many guys that I like in this section.
Like, dude, I actually have Jerry Jeudy as my number 25. And DK Metcalf, I believe, at 26, if I'm not mistaken. I think I have it Worthy 24, Jeudy 25, Metcalf 26. You can argue those guys in any order. You can argue DK should be a top 24 guy on this list. You can argue Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy was unbelievable last year. Jerry Jeudy was within 10 points of Garett Wilson last year.
Yeah, no, dude. All of
they
these
had
guys,
identical years.
I have Godwin and Metcalf in my top 25, and they missed this list because I didn't have Worthy in my top 25 and so on. So, and McMillan, I believe, is at 26 for me. Yeah. So there's dudes in this range. Like Godwin was pacing the whole wide receiver position before he went down. He was a beast before he went down.
In full transparency, if we get fully positive reports going into August, like I can even raise him up to like the top 16.
Oh, I will put him above Mike Evans if he's healthy.
Like that would be the first range of outcome. I actually initially had Godwin over Evans and Godwin in my top 20, but then we kind of talked about it a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's a little bit more muddy of a recovery. I'm going to tentatively for now operate that Evans will be the one in week 1. But if we hear all positive reports, Godwin's recovering quickly, he's still the number 1 receiver, chain mover, slot receiver for this offense. Like 25 on is way too low for what we saw last year. DK Metcalf goes to be the number 1 for a new team. The target ceiling is there. The problem, though, we've seen Arthur Smith, what he's done to wide receiver ones in the past. Even George Pickens, after a fast start last year, we saw the passing production for the Steelers, even despite Russell Wilson being better than Fields, kind of taper off. George Pickens, another guy in this range, George Pickens could very well have the T. Higgins effect, where we have JaMarr Chase, CeeDee Lamb kind of operates as the number 1 there. We have Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, maybe a 90-95% passing projection of that. If George Pickens can just prove that the guy that he's shown flashes of being in the NFL can be that for a 17-game sample size, getting him anywhere in the 20s could be a steal.
Yeah, I actually really like this range, man. Like, especially in home leagues, some of the names
Olave
that we're mentioning. Yeah, Chris Olave, Sutton, too. You know, Bo Nix, going to have probably another good year. any one of these guys, I'd feel comfortable as like my wide receiver 3, my wide receiver 4. Yes. You and I play in a lot of leagues where you can start, because it's more of a
5 or 6 receivers.
Yeah, what I was going to say was you start your draft. Let's say you go JaMarr Chase in the first round. You go Lad McConkey and T Higgins, let's say you go JaMarr Chase in the first round. You go Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor or Chase Brown with your next 2 picks. So you got 2 running backs. You go double hero RB. Round 4-5, you can grab Devonta Smith and Zay Flowers, and then round 6-7, you might still catch some of these guys. So Jeudy, a Sutton, Olave, a George Pickens. Like I actually think that the depth of wide receiver rounds like 3 to 7 is like in home league specifically, not on underdog because we're all thirsty for wide receivers, but in home league specifically, you might be able to walk away with like a nice 4 stack of receivers while also probably having a really solid 2 stack of RBs and maybe even an elite quarterback or tight end.
It's actually wild to me how nice, like quite literally the top 8 or so rounds this year feel very nice at skill position specifically, a running back and wide receiver specifically. It almost makes me think like
round 9 and 10 are like the perfect time to take a tight end and quarterback.
Like, dude, if you want to take in round 9 David Njoku and in round 10 Dak Prescott, in the first 8 rounds you just stacked running back and wide receiver talent, your team's going to be pretty fucking good.
Yeah, especially like it's so hard because you're like, oh my God, Trey McBride's a beast, or Jalen Hurts is a beast or whatever. But it's like, dude, like opportunity bundle. Would I rather have Trey McBride and 10th round receiver? Or would I rather have Vlad McConkey and freaking Dak Prescott?
Like who even like a 10th round receiver? Like maybe home league's a little different.
Rashad Bateman.
Like on underdog, that's what you're looking at.
Okay, like Ricky Pearsall, let's say.
But that would be at best. Yeah, exactly. It goes to show, like if you are in specifically in a deeper league, obviously if you're in like, it's a one quarterback, 2
Start
running
7.
back, 2 receiver, tight end, flex league. Like, okay, prioritize the onesies more in that format. But if you have like 3 flex spots or 3 wide receiver spots and 2 flex spots, like go attack the positions of need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think by about wide receiver 36 to 40, it's going to start to taper off a little bit. And I would ideally like to get 4 or 5 of those guys before it does. But yeah, we're not going to go any further than this. We're going to just go 25 receivers. We've been biting your ear off basically for an hour and a half already. Check out the running back one if you guys didn't see it already. We're going to do quarterbacks and tight ends, hopefully at about half of the amount of time that we did for running backs and wide receivers. But first in-depth look of redraft. If you guys want to take this advice right into action, you can head on over to Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up. Get into some best ball drafts. They have contests for any price range. $3 contest, $10 contest, $25 best ball manias, $2 million up top to first place if you can take it down. $15 million in total prizes. Get some stake into the takes right now. You guys, if you're going to manage redraft league and you've never heard of best ball, it is the easiest way to play fantasy. All you do is draft. There's no waivers. It's an 18-round draft, no trades. You just draft your team. You collect your winnings at the end of the year, and you can use promo code FSE now to get started, up to $1,000 in bonus credit on the site, and also a free pick'em to get started in the pick'em lobbies as well. So if you enjoyed, like the video, comment if you guys are new around here, subscribe to the channel. What do you guys think of the in-person setup? We're definitely going to try and do a lot more of this year than we usually do. Got the little studio going here at my new place, so we got to make the best of it. And again, appreciate all of the support as always. Peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.